The biggest WoW streamer on Twitch has started playing that game's most serious competitor, Final Fantasy XIV. And honestly, it's been insane. Huge personal viewership as well as an exploding player base within the game itself. Developer Square Enix even had to temporarily stop selling digital copies of the game. And you add to that a WoW expansion that's been fairly criticized by many of even its longtime supporters, and things could get a little crazy. Did you know that the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV has a free trial that includes oh, sorry, that's the wrong throw, but I think you know what I'm gonna ask. Please like the video, hit the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell so we can continue to bring you new content. And remember to calm those DPS that are pumping. We exist. So what do you get when the biggest WoW streamer out there decides he's gonna play another MMO? Before Asmongold actually did it, no one was quite sure because, well, Final Fantasy XIV is actually a pretty different game.
This guy's weird, bro.
To be clear, Asmongold has played other games, but WoW has always been his first MMO love. It's what made him basically a streaming celebrity on Twitch. Outside of WoW, Asmongold is a constant presence in streaming more generally, appearing on panel shows and getting into it on Twitter. Like when a now deleted tweet from a Blizzard employee expressing some negativity reached his eyes. He also co-founded One True King with other big streamers like Mizkif, S-Fan, and Rich Campbell. And now, his massive fan base has sent shockwaves through the Final Fantasy XIV community and made it one of the fastest growing games in the world nearly a decade after its release. But before we get into that, let me give you a bit of context here. World of Warcraft has been around for nearly 17 years, and its most recent expansion sent players to the literal afterlife to chase after genocidal Banshee Queen Sylvanas Windrunner, who you may know for burning down an entire tree filled with hippie elves. Final Fantasy XIV, on the other hand, is a game that suffered a terrible initial launch in 2010, dropped a literal moon on the planet in 2013, and then started fresh after a redesign led by producer Naoki Yoshida. It's actually a crazy story, and one that I personally hope to be able to tell you guys on the channel one day. By Yoshida's own admission, WoW's design played an important part in the decisions he made to salvage the game. But despite both being MMORPGs and one's design being heavily influenced by the other, both games are pretty different. WoW is the undisputed champion of that initial MMORPG rush. People kept looking for the WoW killer, but it turned out that WoW survived all of its challengers. The game's philosophy in those early days was simple: give players a lot of content and then release new content when it becomes needed. Eventually, to allow returning players and friends to play the most recent content easily, that new content made the old content kind of pointless. Like, yeah, you can go back in WoW and do an old raid, but there's not really a point because typically you can get the same quality of gear from that normal raid from just quests in this new content patch. Final Fantasy XIV took a different approach. It would actually sync your character's level to the content that your character was doing, so it was always relevant. And in addition to that, the progress that you had made over previous patches wasn't just annihilated by new content. In WoW, a substantial amount of the story actually happens in those raids that I mentioned. So you kind of have to do them if you want to see what happens in the story. In 14, the story is mandatory for everyone and it's largely a solo experience. Even the story released in patches is woven together to create a continuous narrative. And the music, writing, and atmosphere in the game are, in my opinion, all incredibly high quality. Okay, but how does Asmongold fit into all this? Well, he's been one of the voices critical of Blizzard's recent design decisions, and he's been looking to branch out into other MMOs. So his decision to play 14 has just generated interest for the game. And there's been rising dissatisfaction with World of Warcraft for a while. The game's content strategy is basically the same as it was back in Wrath of the Lich King. New patch comes out, you do the dungeons and the raid, and then you wait for the automated content feeding machine to feed you another pellet in 6 to 12 months. And if you didn't touch the old pellet, just throw it away because it's not worth eating now. In addition to that, the community has grown alongside streaming. Many of the top players in the world's best guilds have become content creators. And the race to World First, where the top guilds compete to clear the newest raid on Mythic difficulty, is always a big event on Twitch. That community has tried to give Blizzard feedback to help them understand the issues with the game, often dealing with the newly added expansion features and offered well in advance of the expansion's actual release. But much of that feedback has been seemingly disregarded in the past, so some of these vocal content creators have become increasingly critical of Blizzard. This disillusionment was put into the spotlight recently in Carbot Animation's excellent This Is World of Warcraft video, where the once vibrant social landscape of the game is replaced by a cold, unfeeling content treadmill. And Carbot is another great example of a creator who was even paid to make official skins for a Blizzard game, StarCraft Remastered, but is now voicing their own sort of critique, or at least lament, to Blizzard. And it just so happens that Asmongold is one of those vocal critics. And while he says he still loves the game and just wants it to be better, Asmongold may have done the only thing that can truly frighten Blizzard, exposing their player base to a new MMO, one where their time on the content treadmill is not instantly forgotten the moment a new patch comes out.
Imagine going to work for a company that's made one of the most monumental and biggest flagship games in history, that has been one of the only recent running games that has been inducted into the Video Games Hall of Fame. World of Warcraft is iconic, and then you ruin it. Imagine that. Imagine ruining that.
The biggest WoW streamer playing the game's #1 competitor is simply something that had to happen eventually. But the timing couldn't be worse for WoW. Though patch 9.1 just came out, it took like 8 months for it to release. And the patch disregarded player feedback about many of the core systems in the expansion while pushing the story of Sylvanas in a potentially controversial direction. But again, there's a new dungeon and a new raid. We'll see you again in 6 months if you're lucky. The only thing more surprising than Asmon's decision to play Final Fantasy XIV is that it honestly seems like he's genuinely enjoying it.
Oh shit. Oh no, man.
No!
And in addition to the quality entertainment, it's also given his fans and Final Fantasy XIV players alike some pretty great memes.
Lisa Lamasa prides itself on being Arisia's foremost naval power. Yashlada. Oh, that's her name.
Sure, there have been some issues, like players trying to grief Asmon by using massive mounts to block important NPCs. Although, after Square Enix started handing out suspensions for this, it pretty much stopped.
Imagine if you went to a Foo Fighters concert and every single time that Dave Grohl tried to play a new song, someone drives their car into the set. It's like, get your Mustang out of the way. Like, get it out of the way. We're trying to listen to the band.
Asmongold's first stream on July 3rd for Final Fantasy XIV did really well, averaging about 145,000 concurrent viewers, and the game's player base has continued to explode. So much so, in fact, that Square Enix is starting to take notice and to take action. Though most PC players don't play the game through Steam, the game did hit a concurrent user record there. The game itself also recently hit 22 million registered players. And then on Monday, July 12th, the Windows version of the game was unavailable to purchase through Square Enix, meaning that if you wanted a copy, you had to buy it on Steam, the PlayStation Store, or for Mac. They also restricted new character creation on every North American server for a short period of time on Monday. There were clear server load issues, and then on Tuesday night, most NA servers again were restricted. Though most players have seen restrictions like this in rare cases, to see it affect every server and not surrounding the launch of any content at all was pretty wild. Now, while Asmongold is still playing 14, he said that he plans to play even more MMOs, including Ashes of Creation. But beyond that, it seems like he's still pulling for WoW and hoping that they can fix many of the issues that the community wants to see addressed.
Blizzard on suicide watch? Nah. The thing is, Blizzard should not be on suicide watch. Blizzard should be on like rebirth watch.
But for the moment, Final Fantasy XIV is the game reaping the rewards. My opinion is that this game respects your time and encourages you to be social and friendly with other players, including new players who are called out with the Sprout icon. By the way, if you're mean to a Sprout, if you're mean to my little cinnamon roll in Final Fantasy XIV, you're a piece of shit. And with this surge in popularity, interest in other MMOs has already started to spread. Variety streamer Carnage and OTK founder Rich Campbell have already started to play 14, while Shroud and Summit 1G have started to play one of my old favorites, Star Wars: The Old Republic. So where do we go from here? Final Fantasy XIV has an expansion launching in November, while WoW's next patch has no current release date. I'm happy that Asmon's attention to this game has brought new eyes to it, and I'm sure that will spill over to the other MMOs that he chooses to play. But I have a sneaking suspicion that the humans and orcs in Asmongold's fanbase might enjoy being a cat girl a little more than they thought. And if you're a fan of WoW and this entire thing is worrying you, maybe think of it as a potential wake-up call for the developers to put the game back on track and listen to the community's feedback. Like, I like alluding that if you play an MMO, you're basically like a fucking lab rat. Cause like, it's kind of true. It's kind of true. Like, you're kind of on the treadmill. I don't want to let down the team in WoW, right? So instead, I just let them down completely by being like, I'm not playing this game. And then they don't have any expectations for me, you know? That's good. I got the Limsa mentality now, dude. I don't hang out in Limsa, dude. Like, I hang out in a different city, but that's where all the, like, really, the cat girls, the dragon girls, the bunny girls, the tiny potato girls. What other kind of girls are there? There's just girls, like, regular human girls. There's elf girls. Very rare elf girls.